Welcome back, everyone. Hope you all had a good lunch. We are gonna begin with our third panel for the day. That's on abuse of dominance and vertical restraints, distribution and supply agreements, and practical concerns. And on this panel, we have an array of wonderful and experienced speakers, starting with from our AHP Indonesian office, Albert, Norge from our CNG Philippine office, Duy from our Vietnam office, Elizabeth from our Raja and Tan Singapore office, and Jane of our homegrown Malaysian office. This session will be moderated by Supawat from our Thai office. Just another reminder to all participants, afterwards, during the session, the two screens will have the QR code for Slido. If you had already scanned the Slido QR code just now, you may need to just pick the top button and change the panel to make sure you're now on the panel 3 Slido and not the panel 2 or panel 1 Slido.
Thank you. Good afternoon, and I hope everybody have a good lunch. This session is very challenging because of maybe 2 or 3 reasons. One, the topic itself is very complicated and quite important. The second issue is about myself, because even I have been speaking with these folk or the events for many events, but this is the first time acting as a moderator, and there is a reason behind that, because I'm the one that always drag people deviate from the topic, go to something else that never planned before, and sometimes I put my panelists in trouble. So today, that's why today I will try to stick with my script. That's my goal for today. And the third one actually is I need a big help from you guys, because the challenging things, the third one is about this. This is a session that we start after lunch. So, very easy to fall asleep. So please help me to go through this together. Okay. Let me give my panelists a couple of seconds to introduce themselves about their practice and everything that they want to talk to you guys before we go to the details of the session. Please, Albert.
Thank you, Supawat. Hello, everyone. My name is Albert. I am from Indonesia, from the Asgab M. Hamzah Partners Office. I specialize in competition law. I handle anything related to competition, from merger filings, investigation, advisory, and also compliance. I think that's a brief.
So, hello everyone. Have a good lunch, and then we can come back to the sections, right? So my name is Duy Cao, Duy, and I'm from Vietnam office. I'm the corporate partner. I'm specialized in quite diversified areas of the corporate, also competition and trade and consumer protection, but also other corporate matters and investment matters as well. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Norge Patacsil from the Philippines. Our firm is CNG Law. That's the shorthand for Gatmaitandia, Patacsil, Gutierrez, and Portasio. I'm a corporate commercial lawyer specializing in M&As, investments, and competition law as well. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Jane from CLO, the Malaysia office, focusing on competition law in CLO. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth from Singapore, and you may have heard Carla and Tanya moderate the previous 2 sessions, so we do both competition and trade. Thank you.
Okay, thank you guys. Okay, let's start with our session. The topic is about abuse of dominance and vertical restraints, distributions and supply agreements, and practical concerns. This session, for many of you here, engaging in business of selling, manufacturing, distributing, or purchasing, very important for you. In this session, we will focus on vertical restraints and abusive conduct, which business need to be alert to, and steps to take to remain competition compliant. A supplier can organize a distribution system in a number of ways, reflecting the type of products, the market environment, and the supplier's own views on how to market its product. For example, a supplier may sell directly to its end customers or appoint distributors or dealers to resell its products, or appoint agents to seek orders for the products and then fulfilled by the suppliers. Some argue that competition law should be neutral so far as the choice of distribution system is concerned. Since the supplier is in the best position to judge the most efficient ways of structuring its distribution system. In particular, it is argued that it is generally only intra-brand competition which will be affected by vertical agreements. That is, it's a competition between outlets and distributors of the same suppliers. Such argument has led competition authorities in some countries, for example, Thailand, to take a more lenient attitude towards restrictions in supplies and distribution agreement. However, it is important to bear in mind that supplies and distribution agreement can affect competition between brands and between suppliers. That is, they can affect inter-brand competition. For example, a supplier with a high market share who want to prohibit others from marketing competing products may make it more difficult for suppliers, competitors, to bring their products to the market. Competition may be dampened in a market with extensive vertical agreements between suppliers and downstream distributor or resellers. And also today I think we are going to talk about relationship between suppliers and the online marketplace, I mean in the e-commerce business. In this session, we will look at the different types of supplies and distribution arrangement that competition law has to deal with. We will also look at the issues that these supplies and contribution system raise for competition law in general. So before I go to my fellow panelists, I think we need to assume something. Let us assume, the scenario, a supplier enter into a distribution agreement with two different distributors. In the distribution agreement, the supplier requires two things. First, both distributors to exclusively distribute only the supplier's product, which means the distributors are not allowed to sell the supplier's competitor's product. And two, that each distributor is assigned its own customers or territories to distribute the supplier's product. So now it's come to the question, I think I will start with you, James. Would such distribution agreement or arrangement give rise to competition concern in Malaysia, and why?
Thank you, Supawat. Yes, to answer his question, yes, exclusive distribution and also customer and territorial allocation arrangements may raise competition concerns under our Malaysia Competition Act. And why? Right? Because if you have exclusive distribution and also customer allocation agreements, right, this may limit intra-brand competition between distributors. Right? And it could also result in foreclosure of other distributors. So for example, you have an exclusive distributor, right? So this is the only distributor that can distribute your product. So the other distributors in the market, they would be foreclosed because they are not allowed then, they are prohibited to then distribute your products, right? So that is what I mean when I said it limits intra-brand competition between distributors, and it may also lead to foreclosure of other distributors. And if more or all suppliers actually adopt exclusive distribution arrangements, right, then that may also facilitate collusion, because it would then be like suppliers, each supplier, they will have their own respective distributors. So it's like you are market sharing with each other. You don't actually encroach into each other's market, right? So this is the reason why exclusive distribution and also all these customer and territorial allocation arrangements can raise competition concerns under Malaysia competition law, right? To also explain a little bit further, so under our Malaysian competition law, as Siting explained earlier during panel 1 discussion, we have 2 main prohibitions. So the first one is the prohibition against anti-competitive agreements, and the second is the prohibition against abuse of dominance, right? So you need to take note that for such vertical restraints, right, like exclusive distribution, customer and territorial allocation, such restraints can actually raise concerns not only under Section 10, which is the provision against abuse of dominance. It can also raise concerns under Section 4, which is our prohibition against anti-competitive agreements, right? Because in this case, this is a vertical agreement between the manufacturer, the supplier, and the distributor, correct? So an exclusive distribution restraint or such a customer territorial allocation arrangement can also result in this prohibition, an infringement under Section 4 of our Competition Act. So to give you an example, why do I say that an exclusivity obligation can actually raise concerns under both sections, Section 4 and Section 10? I think sometime in 2014, right, MyCC actually investigated 2 logistics and also shipment companies in Malaysia. And they are Giga Shipping and also Nexus Mega Carriers. So what happened here is that these logistic and shipment companies, they entered into exclusive agreements with their customers, the manufacturers of vehicles, whereby they actually transport cars from West Malaysia to East Malaysia. So they impose exclusivity on these car manufacturers, saying that you can only use our services, but you cannot use our competitor services. And the exclusivity was for a duration of 3 years. So MyCC, in this case, MyCC actually investigated both companies under both sections of the law, under both Section 4 and Section 10, right? Although in the end, both companies actually gave an undertaking to MyCC, promising MyCC that they would cease, all this exclusivity conduct. Therefore, no infringement finding was made in the end. Right, but so the point I'm trying to make here is, it is important to note that, a lot of times businesses, they think that, I don't have dominance in the market, so, exclusivity, no problem, because I don't have 60%, right? So I don't, it's okay for me to enter into exclusive agreements or all these territorial allocation kind of agreements, right? So, but that's not the case. It's not only Section 10, it's not only a case of abuse of dominance. You need to be aware of this restriction against anti-competitive vertical agreements, right? So just very briefly for anti-competitive vertical agreements, MyCC indicated that, so not all vertical restraints are, anti-competitive, right? They are not automatically deemed anti-competitive. So unlike hardcore cartels, like what our first panel mentioned earlier, hardcore cartels are like price fixing, market sharing and all. For this kind of conduct or agreements, these are deemed anti-competitive, right? Which means the regulator does not even need to, carry out the effects-based analysis or even look at your market share. But for an agreement of vertical nature, right, of such, where, you are a supplier and then a distributor or a customer, right, a vertical nature, MyCC will first look at your market share, right? So if either one of you, right, assuming 2 parties in the agreement, the supplier and also the distributor, if either one party has market share of 25% or more in your respective relevant market, then such an exclusive obligation or customer territorial obligation would, on the face of it, raise competition concerns, right? If both parties have less than 25% market share, then the risk is low. But if either one has 25 or more, then on the face of it, it will raise concerns. But then again, it's not automatically anti-competitive, right? Because MyCC would then have to carry out effects-based analysis. MyCC would have to take into consideration a lot of different factors, like what are the market shares of your competitors, right? If your competitors are bigger than you or more powerful than you, right? Or MyCC will also look at factors like the extent of foreclosure, whether such exclusivity will result in many of the competitors being foreclosed, or just a small number of competitors being foreclosed. And MyCC will also look at your justification for such exclusivity. Like, for example, why do you impose the exclusivity? Because you are hiring this, you are appointing this distributor, and you are investing on this distributor, right? You are investing and you are bringing in a new technology. So you need at least a period, a duration, in order for you to recoup your investment that you have incurred, right? So these are all factors which MyCC would take into consideration when deciding whether a vertical restraint like exclusivity is significantly anti-competitive or not under our Section 4. And as for Section 10, as I mentioned earlier, it's 60%. So if you do engage in vertical restraints like exclusivity, and if you do have a market power, which is 60% and more, then this is also something that would be of concern to your business in Malaysia. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. I think, Albert, next is, your turn. Can you share us what happened on this topic in Indonesia?
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you. So the same rule also apply in Indonesia. So the Indonesia competition law also prohibit exclusive dealing, exclusive distribution, and also customer allocation or territorial allocation under the rule of reason. So it means that there are no automatic prohibition of this kind of practice. And from my observation, this kind of practice is widely practiced by companies in Indonesia. And so far there are only a few case in Indonesia that relates to exclusive distribution and also territorial allocation. I think the first case is 2005, and then there are a few cases. So many years there's no case, and last year there's a case that relates to this kind of practice. So it seems that our competition authority, the KPP, is not so aggressive when enforcing this kind of practices. So in the latest case, the company is a local producer of seasoning. So when it enter into distribution agreement with its distributors, it requires the distributors not to sell competing products, and also it allocates the customer and also the area for the distributor. So distributor cannot sell the products outside the area or outside the customer. It applies to the traditional and modern market. So in this case, the KPU opened investigation, but the KPPU did not impose fines because the company agreed to change the practices. It commits to amend all the agreements. So the KPPU end the investigation without imposing any fine.
Thank you, Albert. Actually, what happened in Indonesia is quite similar to Thailand. Let me jump on this issue a bit. In Thailand, there are many cases about exclusivities, but it's died down during the investigation for so many reasons. The classic one, categories why it's dying down, because the one that raised the issue is, let's say, the distributors, and they feel uncomfortable with the agreement, and they raise the issues to OTCC, and then when the OTCC investigate, so they talk to, for example, what I'm talking about is about car manufacturers business. So there's some investigation and asking for clarification from the car manufacturers. But again, I mean, this morning I already told you that when you talk or when you deal with OTCC, I mean, authority in Thailand, just you need, I mean, timing is very important. So the car manufacturers, I mean, it's not just one company, a couple of companies. They spend a lot of time dealing with these issues, and then, they deal with the OTCC, and then they also deal with the distributors. And for some reason, I think they can settle with the distributors from commercial, I mean, for commercial benefit. So the distributor later told OTCC that, okay, we are happy with whatever we agree with the car manufacturers. So the case cannot go any further because, the aggrieved person, I mean, like, they feel, okay now. So that's the reason. That's also happened with other cases regarding exclusivities as well in Thailand. So, Norge, what about Philippines?
Thank you, Supawat. For the Philippines, there are similarities with Malaysia. There's a prohibition against anti-competitive agreements. But what the Philippine Competition Act says is that contracts which have the object or effect of substantially preventing, lessening, or restricting competition are prohibited. So whether or not an entity has a dominant market position, those kinds of contracts are prohibited. Have there been any Philippine competition, our regulator, the PCC, decisions on this? Not yet. We know that investigations are ongoing, but in terms of actual decisions and precedents issued by the PCC, there's still not a lot of guidance yet. So I think this is still a developing thing in the Philippines. The Philippines also prohibits abuses of dominant market position. And in the Philippine Competition Act, there is a list of acts which are considered abuses of dominance. And well, by the way, in the Philippines, an entity is presumed dominant if it has market share in the relevant market of at least 50%. But that's a presumption. The PCC will take a look at other factors of the relevant market, such as barriers to entry, the strength of competitors, whether the entity has any market power or the competitors have market power. But the presumption is you are a dominant in the relevant market if your market share is at least 50%. So in our Competition Act, if the dominant entity imposes restrictions in a contract of sale which relate to where the goods can be sold, what form the goods can be, resold by the, let's say, a distributor or to whoever the dominant entity sells its products to, or if there are restrictions as to price or to dealing with competitors, then that's considered an abuse of dominance. Having said that, our law also makes an exception for franchise agreements and distribution agreements. Now, what the exact scope of those exceptions are, which are in the law, has yet to be fully discussed by the PCC, also because of a lack of precedent. But I guess to answer to the question, yes, there are prohibited contracts in the Philippines, and yes, there are there's a prohibition against abuses of dominance, but there are also exceptions to some of those prohibitions under the law. And aside from specific exceptions, I think like Malaysia and also Indonesia, there's also a rule of reason application, meaning that the law itself says that if, let's say, conduct or an agreement which is alleged to be anti-competitive has, let's say, efficiencies which can be shown to benefit the consumer, then that act or agreement might not necessarily be a violation of the law. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Norge. Sui, I know you have so many things to share, so please. I know by the fact that when we prepare this question, Vietnam sent the longest answer to this question to me, so
Thank you, Supawat. So, to be honest, I think the theories behind Vietnamese competition law are almost the same like some other countries in Southeast Asia, because we are very adaptive and borrow the relevant terms from the EU competition law. And that's why I think I don't see the really significant difference in theories behind it. So I should conclude that yes, there is the competition concerns here regarding the assumption case, but what is the specific difference and what are the things that you may note about the Vietnamese law in this specific case, or I mean in other jurisdictions? So in the Supawat assumption, I see that it is a vertical, right? The vertical is from the supplier to the distributors. So the first thing is that we do govern the vertical agreements, right? Secondly, this type of agreement shall raise two concerns. First, it's about the cartels, even on the vertical basis that we do govern. Secondly, the abuse of dominance. I think the theories are almost the same like Malaysia, as Jane has shared. But what is the difference for Vietnam here is that for the cartel, the criteria could be different. On a vertical basis, you are safe to enter into a cartel agreement if the market share of each company is less than 15%, 15%. So if you have your market share in Vietnam is less than 15, you are almost safe to enter into these agreements, right? So if your market share or the market share of the other side is 15% or more, you should look at the other tests. Other tests could be like whether your competition or your agreement causes significant impacts to the market or not. I mean, there are a series of the criteria to determine about that. But as long as your market share in Vietnam is significant, more than 15%, you should really need to look at deeper into the regulations. All right. The second is about the abuse of dominance, right? Vietnam, we do provide for the first test is the market share as well. If you have a market share in Vietnam of more than 30%, then you really have a position about the dominant position under the Vietnamese law. So in that case, every condition that you impose to the distributors should be very carefully reviewed because it could easily breach the regulations about the abuse of dominance. So I think that's the thing I want to note about the criteria to be determined under the Vietnamese law. First, for cartels, the 15% in the market should be the criteria to be applied. And for dominance, the 30% market share should be the one that you should note. Thank you.
Thank you, Sui. Last but not least, Elizabeth, I think we know that vertical restraints are exempted from Singapore competition law. Would such exclusive distribution agreement, the one that we just discussed, still raise competition concern in Singapore?
So Singapore takes quite a different position compared to other ASEAN countries in that vertical restraints are exempt from the Section 34 prohibition against anti-competitive agreements. This is because the Singapore regulator takes the view that vertical restraints generally are beneficial as long as the undertakings involved are not dominant in the market. So benefits that could arise from such vertical restraints would be efficiencies, non-price competition, investment, and innovation. However, the vertical exclusion doesn't apply in the context of the Section 47 prohibition against abuse of dominant position. So what this means is that if the undertaking is dominant and imposes a vertical restraint like resale price maintenance, this would amount to an abuse of dominant position. if the restraint causes anti-competitive effects in the market. So even in the Singapore context, even if we have this vertical exclusion, it's important to take note that it would still be a concern if you consider your company to be dominant in a particular market.
Thank you. Actually, I tried to look at, thank you, Elizabeth. I tried to look at the questions that's sent to my screen. So there's some interesting questions. Okay, it's on screen now. Actually, starting from our morning session, people already asking, audience already asking, this question related to abbreviations. One is RRP, one is RPM. So, RPM is resales price maintenance, and RM is like, in these questions, recommended retail price. So I think many people want to know whether this is doable under these jurisdictions or not. So Jane, again, starting from you, maybe.
Okay, thanks, Supawat. Yeah, so, okay, in Malaysia, resale price maintenance, in short RPM, MyCC in its guidelines did indicate that it will take a strong stance against a minimum and also fixed resale price maintenance. Okay, so minimum and fixed. So minimum means, you tell your distributors this is the, the minimum price you can resell, and fixed is you tell your distributor this is the only price you can resell my product, right? So MyCC would take a strong stance against such RPMs, right? So what does that mean then? Is it anti-competitive or not, right? So like I mentioned earlier, in Malaysia, we have this prohibition against anti-competitive agreements, and the threshold is, the market share threshold is 25%, right? So if your business and the distributor whom you actually impose this RPM on, none of you actually has 25% or more market share in your respective relevant market, then such minimum or fixed RPM would have low risk of infringing our Malaysian competition laws, right? But if either one of you then has 25% or more market share, then as mentioned earlier, it will, on the face of it, be significantly anti-competitive, and MyCC would then have to take into conduct the effects-based analysis, right? Like I mentioned earlier, look at market shares of competitors, the extent of foreclosure, duration of the restraint and stuff like that, right? So for minimum and also fixed RPM, right? These are, they are problematic, but not automatically anti-competitive, okay? And then let's talk about recommended resale price maintenance, right? So yes, recommendation, okay, if your RPM is a genuine recommendation, right? If you tell your distributor, I recommend it to you to resell it at 5 ringgit, and it's a genuine recommendation. And what do I mean by genuine recommendation? It means, I recommend it to you to sell 5 ringgit, you can sell at any price you want. You can resell it at 4 ringgit, you can resell it at 10 ringgit. And I do not threaten, you that if you do not resell at my recommended price, then I may, withdraw the benefits or withdraw the rebate scheme offered to you, or there are adverse consequences like if you do not resell at my recommended price, then I may shorten the agreement I have with you, So these are all threats or adverse consequences, right? If you do impose these, or along with your recommended resale price maintenance on your distributor, then that recommendation is not a genuine recommendation. So when it's not a genuine recommendation, then it becomes an RPM, Okay, it can then become a minimum RPM or a fixed RPM, and then we will have to go through that same process whereby we again look at your market share, 25%, more or less, and then whether if one of you is has more than 25% market share, then we look at then we will have to conduct effects-based analysis and take into account a lot more factors, right? So that is to answer the question on fixed minimum RPM and also a recommended RPM. Oh yeah, speaking of recommended RPM, so in Malaysia, we actually do have a case, okay, in relation to recommended pricing, recommended RPM, right? So sometime in a few years ago, so MyCC actually investigated Coca-Cola, right? Investigated Coca-Cola for the notices which Coca-Cola actually issued to its supermarkets and also hypermarkets. So what Coca-Cola did was, Coca-Cola actually gave a recommended retail pricing to its supermarkets and hypermarkets, telling them that, okay, I'm recommending to you to resell our Coca-Cola products at this price, right? So this got caught MyCC's attention. So MyCC investigated, and MyCC in the course of its investigation carried out a field investigation, which means MyCC actually sent its enforcement officers to all these supermarkets, hypermarkets, to actually check the prices of Coca-Cola products being sold in the market. And what MyCC eventually found was that actually all these supermarkets and hypermarkets, they were actually given, they were not forced to actually resell at a recommended price, and they actually independently determined their own resale pricing, right? A lot of them, or most of them, did not even follow the recommendation given by Coca-Cola. So because of this outcome of this field investigation, MyCC then decided that there was no infringement, okay, for Coca-Cola's case, right? So that is an example of recommended resale price maintenance in Malaysia. So just one very last point to add on, I also wish to mention this maximum resale price maintenance, right? So I spoke about fixed minimum and recommended, right? Now there's another form which is maximum RPM. So what is a maximum RPM? You tell your distributor, this is the maximum price that you can resell, right? I tell you, this is the 5 ringgit, you can only resell at most 5 ringgit. You cannot sell more than 5 ringgit, but you can sell lower than 5 ringgit. So isn't this good for the consumers? It is, right? Because then we wouldn't be charged more than 5 ringgit, right? So, and that's the purpose of competition law. It's to protect us, the consumers, right? So it's actually a good thing. So maximum price, RPM, it shouldn't be a problem, but it can be a problem when it results in downstream collusion. It's a focal point for downstream collusion. So what does that mean? So, for example, a manufacturer sets a maximum RPM for all its distributors, and the manufacturer has 5 distributors. So the manufacturer says, okay, maximum 5 ringgit, all of you cannot sell more than 5 ringgit. And end up all 5 distributors actually resell at 5 ringgit. No one resells at any other price except 5 ringgit. So what happens? So it becomes a downstream collusion. The collusion is now happening downstream from where the manufacturer is, where the distributors are. So the distributors are all then colluding with each other, reselling the product at the same price, which is 5 ringgit. Because they don't want to sell less than 5 ringgit, right? Because they want to maximize their profit. So that can also be a problem. So if you do impose maximum RPM on your distributors, so this is something that you need to take note of as well in Malaysia, right? Okay, yeah, that's all from me, thanks.
Thank you, Jane. I think the next person that I want to ask the same question is Albert, about RRP, RPM.
Yeah. So the Indonesian competition law also prohibits minimum resale price maintenance. So it doesn't specifically mention about the fixed resale price, but in practice, the authority also has a view that this provision also cover fixed resale price. It means that when the producer sets the fixed resale price, that at the same time it becomes the minimum resale price. That's the reason why this provision also cover the fixed resale price. So RPM is not per se illegal. So this practice is prohibited only if it results in anti-competitive effects. There is no such a threshold for whether below 30% that there is no, then the risk of violation is low. So it is very difficult to say that whether under 15%, if the company has only like 50%, then the risk is low. So there is no, it is not easy to assess whether an RPM may trigger a violation of the law. But until now, there are only like 2 cases, one in 2005 and one case in 2023, last year.
Okay.
It also involved the same company that I also mentioned before. So in this case, the company practice like exclusive dealing, and then territorial allocation, and also RPM. So all of these kind of vertical restraint have been included in the same distribution agreement.
Okay.
So as I mentioned before, the company agreed to change its practice to amend the RPM also. So the KPPU ended the investigation without imposing any fines.
Okay, thank you. Actually, I just want to share a bit about Thailand. We probably end up with the same answer with Malaysia or Indonesia. But the reason the regulators allows RRP or RPM in Thailand is quite unique, if you ask me. There are a lot of investigation, complaint going on, flying around. But many companies, the way the way they do things is that they said, okay, this is a resale price maintenance, RPM, or recommended resale price, but it's not a compulsory. When they deal with the distributor, when they deal with the supply chains down the track, they said this is just recommended, meaning if you follow our recommendations, you get X, Y, Z. So if you don't, we are okay. We're still happy to do business with you. We still keep supplying the product to you, but you won't get X, Y, Z benefits. So this type of arrangement, I think in Europe, for example, is illegal. I think the regulator in European Union took the views already that is especially if you are dominant, so you will be in trouble. But in Thailand, still, I think we have more flexibilities to the business operators. Okay, that's from Thai law perspective. Practice what's going on in Thailand. So actually, let me jump to the question from the audience, from the floor. Actually, these 2 questions that you see on screen is about market share. So let me bundle these 2 questions together. It's very simple. How the regulator in each country identify the market. In order to find out the market share, you need to identify the market first. So anyone want to go first? So yeah, so please.
So thank you. And for Vietnam, I would like to share a little bit about the methodology to determine the market share that the Vietnamese authority could do. Basically, we do determine the market share based on the 2 concepts. The first is the relevant geography market, Then the second is a relevant product market. So basically, to determine the relevant geography market, it could mean that whether the regulator could determine the narrow market or the broad market. It depends on the product. The broadest market could be the whole territory of Vietnam. For example, the products are on the assumption that it can be easily delivered and transferred between the different cities and the different provinces without significant change of the price. Let's say, for example, Vietnam, our length is 2,000 kilometers, right? So for the delivery of the product from the north to Vietnam, it doesn't make the significant changes of the price of the product. Then it is highly that the relevant geography market should be the entire Vietnam. But we do see the cases that relevant geography product could be very narrow market. For example, a few years ago, we do assist a client in the cement industry. That's the fresh cement industry. The theory is that when they make the cement, the ready mixed cement, they cannot be delivered within the whole country of Vietnam. Like after there is the delivery from the production port, the product could be immediately frozen and cannot be used. So in that situation, the relevant geography market could not be entire of the Vietnam because the entire territory is so big. So the relevant geography market in that situation could be like determined to be how far from the place they mix the cement product, like 100 kilometers. So it takes like the estimate like 2 or 3 hours of delivery on truck. Then the product can still be used and will not change the nature of the product. Then the geography market could be very narrow within 1 or 2 provinces, not the entire of the territory. So that's for the determination of the geography market. About the relevant market for the product, it basically determined based on the products that directly compete to each other, right? From this company and another company, whether they are directly competing each other, then they could form a relevant product market and to be determined as a relevant market. But it could be larger determination to be like the relevant products that could be replaceable, right? Can substitute the other product. For example, you use this steel product, but if there is no steel, you can use some other material to replace steel, to substitute steel products. Then the larger market for the relevant product could be include both steel and also aluminum or some other relevant materials that could form a larger relevant product market. So that, I think, is the general theory for determination of the market share. So based on that two concepts of the geography market and the relevant product market, then it will calculate how much is your revenue over generated regarding to that products to determine your market share. Basically, the determination shall be based on the revenue of your product. Thank you.
Okay, Norge, I think you have something to share, right? Thank you, Sui.
Yeah, in the Philippines, we also have similar concepts in determining what the relevant market is. So there's the relevant product market and the relevant geographic market. So in terms of the relevant product market, it's mainly a question of substitutability, and competing products are the products essentially substitutable. So you can consider them one product market. And then for the geographic market, it's at least for a merger filing that we did, the Commission's main question was how far would the customer go to buy this certain product, which was cement, because we were arguing for a national geographic market, but the Commission was saying that it can't be a nationwide market because given the nature of cement and how expensive it is to transport, then normally the customers won't buy from Luzon, which is one of the major islands, will not go to another major island to buy the cement. It would only be within a certain radius or kilometer from where they are. So that's essentially the relevant geographic market. And when combined with the relevant product market, that's you get the relevant market from which market share is determined, and with that, determining whether or not an entity is dominant in that relevant market.
Okay, James, what about Malaysia?
Thanks,
Thank you.
Supawat. Sorry, so speaking of this question, right, I've got an interesting case, a MyCC's case to share, right? So this is in respect of how MyCC actually determine the market share of a company. So recently, MyCC issued a non-infringement decision against Delivery Hero. So in Malaysia, we call that Foodpanda, right? So what happened in this case is that MyCC actually investigated Delivery Hero for an alleged exclusive obligation which Delivery Hero imposed on its merchants pursuant to its preferred partnership category arrangement with its merchants, right? So when it comes to abuse of dominance investigations, what would MyCC do? MyCC would first of all, determine whether the enterprise is dominant or not, and if the enterprise is dominant, then only then MyCC would look at whether the enterprise has abused its dominance, right? So in this case, MyCC was trying to determine whether Delivery Hero is dominant in Malaysia or not, in its relevant market in Malaysia. So why is this interesting, and why did MyCC then eventually made a non-infringement finding against Delivery Hero, right? So when MyCC was trying to determine whether Delivery Hero was dominant in Malaysia or not, MyCC started off by looking at the individual annual reports, right, of Delivery Hero, which is Foodpanda, and also looking at the annual reports of the competitors of Delivery Hero, right? So MyCC looked at that, and then MyCC decided, oh, Delivery Hero, you have more than 60% market share, right? So which means you are actually dominant in Malaysia, right? But then after that, MyCC decided, okay, I have this second basis of assessment, right? And MyCC thinks, okay, I will also look at your gross merchandise value. So what is that? So basically, MyCC then look at, the number of orders, right? So this is a GMV, gross merchandise value. It actually includes all orders actually sold on Delivery Hero's platform, okay, regardless whether the orders were successful or failed, or it was cancelled in the end, right? And then for the revenue-based assessment, MyCC would look at the actual commission which the Delivery Hero actually earned from the merchants. So MyCC actually carry out a look at two different sets of data. MyCC look at the turnover, okay, derived from the actual commissions earned from the merchants. MyCC also look at GMV, right? All the orders which Delivery Hero got, regardless whether it was successful or failed, right? And when MyCC carry out the second assessment, the GMV assessment, MyCC found out that, Delivery Hero, you actually have less than 60% market share, right? So in the end, MyCC decided that on the balance of probability, MyCC feels that, okay, we are going to adopt the GMV approach. So we decide that you have less than 60% market share, and therefore, we do not even need to go on to the second stage, to see whether your exclusivity is actually anti-competitive or an abuse of your dominance or not. So I say this is an interesting case to share because the regulator in Malaysia, the regulator doesn't only look at the turnover, doesn't only look at your revenue. There are different metrics, different bases of assessment, right? So, if you do get investigated, and then MyCC asks for your turnover, your revenue figures or your turnover figure, right, to prove whether you have dominance or whether you have 25% market share in Malaysia. So there are different ways to actually go around it, right? You can give your turnover information, your revenue information, but there may be other metrics which you can actually adopt to try to reduce your market share. And because of this, Delivery Hero was then found to not infringe, our Malaysia competition law. So this is something, which is quite important to take note of, right?
Thank you, James. Can you also answer the questions regarding the market share again? I mean, the question is market share determined at the point of alleged violation or at the point of investigation? Yeah. Okay. Actually, let's start from Thailand. I mean, it's quite obvious. I mean, in Thailand, we look at the issues. I mean, when you talk about market share, we look at the market share during the time of alleged violation, meaning when you do something wrong, we look at that particular point in time, I mean that period, not the investigation itself, because, I mean, not the investigation period itself, because the investigation period can happen 3 years after, or even finish like 10 years later on. We have one case still going on for 10 years already in Thailand. So it's quite obvious that we need to look at the market share at the time of alleged offense. Yeah. Okay, maybe Norge can add something.
In the Philippines, it's the Competition Commission which brings, of course, charges for violations of the Competition Act. But if it has a charge of abuse of dominance, the PCC will, of course, make an initial determination, or has to make an initial determination, that the respondent is dominant in the relevant market. But there is nothing to prevent the respondent, the accused, from contesting the market share or the dominant position that's alleged by the regulator. In fact, if it's able to successfully show that it's not, in fact, a dominant entity, then the abuse of dominance charges should be dismissed. So, in an abuse of dominance allegation or accusation, then yes, the respondent can, and if it's able to, should show that it's not actually, it does not actually have a dominant market position, and it should be able to, of course, present its own figures, or as Jane said, the metrics to show or to defeat that kind of allegation.
Okay. Actually, another question for you, Norge. Sorry, James. I just need to let Norge answer this question because it's addressed to Philippines. The question is market share a factor of consideration in the Philippines when it comes to assessing the legitimacy of RPM? Yeah, that's the question.
I think the answer to that is yes, because in the Competition Act, there is a specific abuse of dominance, which, as I mentioned, prohibits the dominant entity from imposing restrictions as to how the good is resold, and that includes imposing restrictions as to price. But there's also an exception in the Competition Act which says that for valid distribution agreements where both parties have the unilateral ability to terminate the agreement, that restriction is essentially that restriction essentially does not apply. Has that exception been tested in the Philippines? Not yet, okay. But it is in the law.
Okay, so I think we are running out of time. So actually, there are so many questions that people want to know. But for the interest of time, I just want each of you to spend at least 2 minutes, I mean, at most 2 minutes, to talk about the enforcement trend in each jurisdiction. I mean, what the audience, I mean, the company should look for in the coming years. Okay, Albert, maybe start with you. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. So this year we have a new commissioners, and it seems they are so excited. So after they they start the tenor, they start so many investigation. So right now, there's so many ongoing investigation and proceedings at the KPPU, which involve abuse of dominance and also vertical restraints. And the KPPU has set like a focus of industry, which cover, example, electricity, gas, chemical, and mining, where the KPPU has found that the competition index is quite low. And then the KPPU also focusing on scrutinizing the big players in the digital economy. For example, the KPPU is proceeding. There is a proceeding a gatekeeper, a global company. You may already know the name, and it is also the same cases also occur in the other jurisdiction. And right now, KPPU also investigate the practice of prosperity obligation in the online travel agency. We heard that this case is triggered by a complaint by the Hotel Association. You know that this kind of practice already prohibited in many jurisdictions. We do not know whether this investigation will lead to the prohibition of this practice also in Indonesia. So we see that companies should be more careful if they already has, especially when they have dominant position in Indonesia, and Indonesia company that has more than 50% of market share will be considered dominant. There is no way that you can reject the allegation of dominance when you exceed the threshold. I think that's
maybe Elizabeth first before we come to you. Sui, yeah, please.
Hello, hi. Thank you. So one enforcement trend in Singapore would be that businesses should be alert to consumer complaints made to the regulator. So the Singapore's regulator, CCCS, will take action against any consumer complaints that is received. And particularly within the digital platform space, there have been a handful of investigations triggered from consumer complaints that CCCS has received. So in 2016, CCCS investigated the online food delivery industry in response to complaints that an online food delivery provider had entered into exclusive agreements with certain restaurants, which prevented these restaurants from using other providers' food delivery services. And yet again, in 2019, CCCS commenced investigations into the online food delivery industry and virtual kitchen sector because there was industry feedback that certain online food delivery service providers refused to supply online food delivery services to other competing virtual kitchens. So it's very important for companies to take into consideration how their actions may be perceived by the public in Singapore.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Sui, please.
Okay, so for Vietnam, I think this is something you don't like to hear because the key thing is that we have just restructured the regulator, and the regulator itself have reorganized and has been replacing the previous competition authority, which is very slow in enforcing the cartel and the dominance regulations. But since May last year until now, the new authority has been introduced and established, which is called Vietnam Competition Commission, which is a very powerful and very new authority that replaced the former regulator. So as you know, right, as a new authority, they're gonna do things very proactively to gain the good feedback from the community, to protect the market, to comply with the political instructions. I mean, that's really the functions of the new entity or the new authority. And therefore, based on our observation and discussion with the VCC, the Vietnam Competition Commission, recently, all the personnel and also the facility have been ready in place, and they take a very serious and proactive approach towards the cartel and the dominant regulations. So it means they can do the investigation very proactively against those activities. So please note that the situation in Vietnam now would be very tight in the future for the compliance and enforcement of the cartel and also the dominance regulations. Thank you.
It seems to me that in the next few years you will be very busy.
But maybe.
Okay, Norge, anything to share?
Yep. In the Philippines, what I can say is that, well, vertical restraints, they're not illegal per se. They're to be ruled on based on the rule of reason. Even in abuses of dominance, the regulator will consider efficiency considerations and possible benefits of alleged violations to consumers. Currently, there are investigations ongoing, but the Commission has been a bit slow in resolving and issuing actual decisions that would serve as useful guidance or precedents to businesses. So, you know, there's the Commission, I think, is still waiting to catch its big fish, because there still has been no, you know, really big company that has been held liable by the Commission for violations of the Competition Act. It's still searching for its big fish. So what we tell our clients and businesses in general, you know, okay, the regulator might be a bit slow, but you still have to be cautious and careful with your conduct, because you don't want to be that first big fish of the PCC. Thank you.
Jane, now
Okay, thanks.
your turn.
Yeah, so in Malaysia, well, I think, right, MyCC's focus has been a lot more on hardcore cartels, right? Like, Siting mentioned earlier today, MyCC says that hardcore cartels is like the supreme evil of competition law, right? So I would say that MyCC's focus is a lot more on cartels like, the bid rigging, price fixing kind of activities or agreements, right? But that also doesn't mean that MyCC is not looking at vertical restraints and also abuse of dominance. So the law has been enforced since 2012, and it has been around like 12 years since the law came into force. MyCC has around like 6, vertical restraints or abuse of dominance cases, right? And I think the reason why MyCC is slower or is more, active in terms of investigating cartel is also because it's harder to actually establish infringement for vertical restraints and also abuse of dominance, right? Because MyCC needs to prove market share, MyCC needs to look at a lot of all these factors, like the extent of foreclosure, whether everyone is actually foreclosed or just a limited number of competitors are foreclosed, duration of the foreclosure and stuff. So it's a little bit more difficult. There are a lot more for MyCC to do to actually prove of anti-competitive vertical agreement and also abuse of dominance. But that doesn't mean that this should be taken lightly. So if your business or your organization does have market power in your in your market, so do take note of all these vertical restraints and also abusive conduct. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, actually there's so many questions, but time is up. So anyway, thank you for listening to us, and thank you my fellow panelists, and please enjoy the next sessions. Thank you.